I would say, keep a really open mind to everything that you do. Um, if your customers are talking to you, listen to them. I mean, I think I should never been a sort of like, you can't tell people how to use your product. You can't say like you're holding it wrong, you're using it wrong. You're there to serve them. So, if they
Yeah.
need something and they're willing to pay, and you can do it, and it wouldn't, impact you that much, let's try it.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7 and 8 figure businesses, as well as a founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. You ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, Matt Soriano. And Matt, as a quick introduction, so his parents migrated or immigrants to the U.S., and so he grew up in the suburbs, if I don't get too tongue-tied, of New Jersey, and was always liked to figure out things, how to do things for himself. And so part of that was impacted by being a hemophiliac, and so couldn't always play with team sports. And so always was looking to figure things out on his own. Went to Dartmouth College and got a CPA degree, graduated, and started working worked for a hedge fund. Wanted to take a break and get back into the world, or at least the outdoor world. And while I was doing that, also saw that 3D printers were coming out and the opportunities there. Tried a few different inventions. It didn't quite go anywhere before coming up with his current invention and pursuing it while also working full time. So with that much as an introduction, welcome on the podcast, Matt.
Well, good. Thanks to hear from you again, Devin. I mean, it's been a rough ride. I always say on the website, one bottle hydration is a one man operation, but my day job is a one man. It's like a 1.5 man operation. So what's left for one bottle hydration is like a manlet. It's like a dwarf operation. So, there's a lot to do, and there's a lot to do, but it's so thrilling and fulfilling to work on all this stuff.
That's awesome. That's
you know,
always, that always seems like it's the case when you're ever getting a business up and going, that there's always more things to do than a person can do it, and yet you have to figure out a way to get it done. So that's awesome. So, well, maybe to kick the episode off, I gave a much more condensed or shortened version of a much longer journey. So let's rewind and unpack that a bit. So tell us how your journey kind of got started with your parents migrating to the U.S. and growing up in New Jersey.
well, yes, of course. It's kind of, I think really, my parents are immigrants. They are doctors, which I really credit for my survival. I am a hemophiliac. I was one in the 80s. It's that blood clotting disorder. I think you're aware of Ryan White, who got HIV and died of AIDS in the 80s because he had to use donated blood products. And so there was always that fear, for like 15 years of my life. I could never really let you loose and have really a conventional childhood. There was no little league, no Boy Scouts. I mean, I barely got to learn how to ride a bike. So I always had to be sort of thinking about stuff to avoid getting hurt and needing to replace my clotting factor and risking the AIDS. We've got better medicines now, but I'm so glad for my parents who kept me safe during that time. But because of that adversity, that's sort of the thing that sparks a taste for creativity. I was always sort of a tinkerer. If I couldn't play with the other kids, I was build taking apart their toys. The Legos. My dad does not. He hated the Legos, but I'm always like thinking about new ways of doing stuff, new ways to organize stuff. But life happens. I work in the back office at a hedge fund in Connecticut, and you work in finance, right? And you think
so. Before you get too far into finance, and we'll definitely go there because that's a good part of your journey. So you grew up kind of as always figuring things out, and and I get there is a not by choice, but you're having to figure out different ways to find entertainment and get things going because being a hemophiliac, it creates a issue with doing some team sports and other things, which makes perfect sense. So as you're now figuring things out, you go off to Dartmouth College, and what made you decide to go into being a CPA, or kind of how did you get going down that route?
So entering accounting, I mean, it's I think the main sort of need for that is really, you need sort of a skill to feed yourself while you sort of like, work on, whatever you have in life, whatever I have in life. I'll have some way of like feeding myself and, getting and maintaining uninterrupted health insurance and, living, right. You need, art, I was never really a successful tinkerer until almost now. Right. So like,
Mm,
you do need to sort of like, pay the bills. You need to make some money. There's always a need, there's always a need for people who are numerate. I'm really good with Microsoft Excel. So, my hedge fund, Ellington Management Group, is that there's a really great bunch of guys there. And it's a really sort of, it's a really good sort of loose, easygoing environment. And sort of they sort of put up with my weird personality. So and
mm.
sort of, it's always been a sort of good place for me. They've been sort of tolerant of my stuff. So I was able to sort of stick around there for a very long time until sort of, until it really, you see you see how like 3D printing is happening in 2013. You
Mhm.
see stuff like, Elon Musk go from PayPal to Tesla to reversing rockets down on the launch pad. I mean, you can learn, I really sort of learned from that. Like, we don't really need degrees and teaching. What we need is to learn. And there's, I think, realistically, the early I think sort of the late 2000s was when we really, that sort of huge creative flowering of like learn it on your own material came out, right? You can learn from YouTube, you can learn from discussion boards, you can learn from Reddit. And I think another thing I realized is that sort of, the rest of, that you can't just sort of like learn something and have it be like perfect the first time. I mean, I think the sort of, main thing that I learned from all my sort of explorations after I started like designing stuff was just sort of that, the rest is sort of experience, right? You can't,
Sure.
there's no substitute for like iterating and iterating and iterating. So
No, I
that's,
definitely think that makes perfect sense. So now just rewinding and getting back just a
yeah,
bit of
yeah,
the journey. And so
yeah,
so now you come out of Dartmouth College, got
yeah.
the CPA, went and worked for a hedge fund. And I
Mhm.
think as we chatted a bit before, and I think you're still in that realm, but as you're working for the hedge fund, one of the things that you found, if I remember right, is you wanted to take a break and kind of get back in the world now. World more in the outdoors world, not just get back into the world in general. And so now as you're kind of getting back into the outdoors world, how did that impact your set your direction or set your path in the direction where you're at now, or kind of how did that evolve?
I think, you know, it's, I think, when you work in finance, you really sort of, realize, the central rule is interest compounds, right? So your wealth grows from whatever you had the year before, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, the longer you spend within this world, right? Sort of the world where like the past determines the future, you realize how sort of constricting it is, right? Like, you will not make like X amount of money unless you had like X divided by point zero whatever the year before, right? And so, you know, it's really, it's really a sort of an abstract world that we live in, right? Like, and it's not really, the choices that you make, the work that you do, and those things don't really sort of, those things are sort of like abstracted in the financial world, but those really aren't sort of like, part of the models that we do, right? There's a rate of return. You sort of work your way through it. You sort of make these assumptions, but like, there's no, it's really sort of like the past determining the future, and I want your choices to determine the future. And sort of that's sort of that growing sort of realization that, you get older in life, you want sort of more control, and you want to really do stuff, not make the numbers happen. So,
Mm.
you
So,
know,
so now as you're kind of coming to that bit of realization, just out of kind of, or partially out of curiosity, because you'd mentioned that you kind of got into the getting to the world and kind of taking a diversionary view of, hey, I'd like to try and pursue a few of my own ideas and that. Now you've got the one, the current project or business that you're doing now, but what were some of the other inventions or things that you kind of came up with along the way?
oh man, there's a lot of cringe here, right? I mean, like, so yes, I talk a big game about like building experience. Some of the experience was kind of cringe. Um, there was one time in my life when my wallet kept on sliding out of my pants. So I actually said, okay, well, I know this design software. there are these like tile locator devices, the Apple locator devices. I
Mhm.
designed like a sort of a clip, a wallet with like a rigid spot to hold one of those things, and like and a space for some credit cards. It was so gigantic. I mean, there was nothing compact about this wallet at all. Um, I was really into using mason jars for a lot of stuff. So, I said, okay, well, it would be awesome if I didn't have to like unscrew the mason jar, I could just like push a button and open it like those Contigo like coffee lids. So I tried making that. It didn't seal very well. Um, at the gym, there were TVs, but like you couldn't really. I mean, like you couldn't really control the TV like you could control your TV at home. So I made like a little clip to hold my phone up on the TV, so it would be right where right on the blank TV, but like you could watch Netflix instead of morning TV. And it was great because like it was great because like you really sort of like built it. It really you could build the habit of like exercising when you were watching your stuff rather than so like going, oh god, we're exercising and now it's the Today Show. So, and of course I do enjoy the odd day hike once in a while. And of course, and I would probably be an early adopter with the trekking pole. But it kind of I realized early on, well, not early on, that it's kind of terrible to like stop the hike to put your trekking poles away. So I like hacked something together with my design software to make like a little clip to hold your poles, like a little holster for it. But that didn't really work because like the real problem, there's no real solution to that problem. But
Mm.
the idea of like hiking technology, another thing, the reason that we stop during the hike is to drink water, and then one bottle happens, right? I realized that like you know if you have a Camelback, 90% of the time you got it because you like the tube and the bite valve. You're not really caring about that flexible bag part on your back. If anything, that's worse because like it gets all moldy and gross. So then
Mm.
I started like working away to sort of like combine all the stuff together, combine like a regular water bottle with a Camelback, and then here we are. So here we are. I mean, I know it was definitely a harder road than most. Oh my gosh, I kept the budget low. So
And yeah, no, I think, and that's definitely insightful. So if I to kind of unpack that a bit, so you're trying a lot of different things. Some of those sound like fun adventures. It sounds like that they may not been quite as on the practical side or always worked as well as you have desired, but I think that's always a path to identifying the good idea that is impactful. It does provide a path forward. So now as you're coming up and you're saying, okay, we're out backpacking, trying to solve some different problems. One of them was, hey, I like the Camelback with the idea of having the ability to drink from a hose or a tubing with the valve without having to always dig into my bag and be able to continue on. And you say, well, let's make this a better product by letting you use your water bottle, which makes perfect sense. Now, to help us take through, because at that time and I think even still today, you still have your full-time job. So how did you kind of, as you're coming up with the idea and saying, hey, this might be something to pursue, how did you build a business alongside doing the full-time job?
I think well, I'm going to say like the pandemic kind of helped. The I was at home. You can see that 3D printer beside me was sort of work. I was sit at home, sort of working with this like while we were working from home. I would also say that like I tried to sort of keep the scale going like pretty low level. I mean, that's sort of one of the reason why I think the 3D printer was great, because I didn't have to sort of like enter the one bottle hydration full hog, right? Quit my job, leave the security, and just like
Mm.
go right into one bottle hydration. And it's a good thing because like a couple of the early ideas that I had for this product were really terrible. I mean, like they would not have worked that well. And, I was able to like spend some time like iterating the product, keeping with my day job, manufacturing 100 here and there, getting advice from all my customers, and then just like and getting better all the time. There was no sort of I think of course there was no sort of like jumping into this full stream, because yes, I think Cuban on Shark Tank always says you got to like just do it, commit to it fully. But I think I took a different route of just bootstrapping it, really. I mean, like I was making these guys, selling them for $25 each, saving the money, and then like working going from there to paying you for your for the patent. and then
Sure.
paying for the injection molding, and then it gradually like sort of letting the business grow organically. So yeah, I mean, I think I think that the main thing is that I try, I kept the overhead low, and then that
Mm.
way that's allowed me to sort of like move more tentatively, take fewer risks, and sort of bootstrap the whole thing. So I didn't see like, oh my gosh, I'm $10,000 into this thing for the injection molding tooling. I didn't make I yeah, I don't have to like sell the company to some guy who like comes by with a sack full of money. That
Yep.
now like I still have this business under my control. So
No, and I
hopefully,
think that, and it's interesting, and you mentioned Shark Tank and Mark Cuban, because I think me and my wife, we always watch them on Sunday nights. And we've either watched all of them or pretty close, or for all the seasons. So it's one that I started watching, and then my wife started watching with me. But one of the things that's always interesting is you notice sometimes they'll say you need to go whole hog or all in, and other times you say you spend how much or you did what. And I think that the point is whether or not you go all in or you take the step by step approach, iterating and or first of all keeping your burn low, and not just expending all the money when you're still figuring out the product and how it works and getting product feedback, and then also keeping your burn low such that it doesn't burn the company or doesn't kill the company right out of the chute before it's even able to figure out what it is always a great path. And so now as you're doing that, and you're also juggling the full-time job, I think that's kind of where you're at today, right? In other words, you're still, the one bottle is continuing to grow, and you're also continuing the one with the business. So kind of now looking, and how, just to maybe give the audience a bit of an idea, how long has one bottle been around, and how long has it been in existence?
so I've been messing around on Kickstarter for since about 2018, 2018. Took a break in 2019, but the name of this company, One Bottle Hydration, came out in 2020. That was sort of when somebody, I mean, I just made these things. I finally got like an order of like 40 or 50 of these lids that I need for it. And I was like, I put it on Etsy, and it's like, oh my God, I've made some money. And then in 10,
and,
10
and,
minutes,
and even if you don't make a lot of money, it's always those first sale or two. And it's just like, somebody actually will pay me for my idea. This is
exactly.
awesome.
Yeah, I'm not alone here, like, toiling for nothing. Someone else sees value. It was in Montana. And then another person, like 10 miles away from him, orders another thing. I was like, oh man, this could get big. So that was in like June 2020. So
Mm.
June 2020, but I was hamstrung by like lack of parts. The volume started picking up in 2021. And in 2022, I finally actually transitioned away from my 3D printer. So I've been around since about, I would say about 18 months,
Mm.
about 2 years, 2 years so far. Sort of focusing on the one bottle hydration stuff. And
Okay.
so, but the real thing is I'm hoping to, get into retail stores, maybe for spring of this year,
Oh, that's
there's,
exciting.
yeah, I know. And at that point, this went from like hobby to side hustle to side business. And now I think it might, maybe this could be like my job. But I mean, that depends on how well sort of like the retail environment works. But I mean, you know, it's always tough. But I mean, I think I have had to pay consultants. But if you think about it, right, I would have had to pay thousands of dollars to fly to Denver and talk to all these buyers, and who knows whether my personality would have actually worked on them. So
Mm.
some things, you can't. Some things you do have to outsource. You
No, and
know,
I think that's also what you kind of learn as you iterate through the process. I mean, you start out and it's a one-man show, and you're prototyping, you're doing sales, you're doing the marketing, you're doing the mailing the products and everything else out. And then as you continue to grow, you're saying, hey, if I'm going to continue to expand this, I need to bring the experts on board. I need to continue to grow it, and I need to continue to formalize and pivot and update and make it better. And so I think that all of those are great lessons to learn. And it sounds like, it's continuing to be on the path of continuing to grow and continuing to provide what was started out as a hobby to a side hustle to maybe a larger thing. And that's always a fun path to go down.
oh
So now,
yes.
so now with that, as we're kind of reaching the present day of your in journey, and even looking a bit into the future, it's always a great time to transition to the two questions I always ask towards the end of each episode. So we'll jump to those now. So the first question I always ask is, along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made? What'd you learn from it?
I think the worst decision that I made was really getting so excited about this, about 3D printing, that like I tried to like 3D print more of the one bottle hydration system than I could. And I was basically like reinventing the wheel. And that was just dumb. I mean, like, it took forever. And I kept on
Mm,
working on like how to optimize this rather than just saying, you know what, we can get these parts for $3 from AliExpress. They can use translator apps. We'll sort of come to an understanding of what we need. And just this whole aspect of reinventing the wheel, that cost me a year from about 2019 to 2020. So that was probably the worst business decision that I made. It's just sort of like letting myself get totally anchored into this way of building stuff. The 3D printer is a tool, but it's not, it serves one bottle hydration, not the other way around.
no, and I think that certainly makes sense. And I think that, I am an engineer and worked with a lot of engineers. And one of the things that you tend to do as an engineer is what you want to have the product perfect and you want to have it just right. And then you're also always coming up with new features and new ways of doing it, which isn't bad. It's not that you shouldn't be continuing to improve and expand the product and making it better. But a lot of times, if you're not careful, what ends up happening is you're forever engineering, you're forever tinkering on it and working on it, and you're never actually building a business or selling it, and it never goes anywhere. And so I think there is always that balance that you have to learn that by mistake is I can't just sit here and forever be trying to add new features or improving it at the expense of building the business. And I have to find that balance. So I think it's definitely a great mistake to learn from and a good one to make. Second question I always ask is, so now if you're talking to someone that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give them?
I would say, keep a really open mind to everything that you do. If your customers are talking to you, listen to them. I mean, I think the version of one bottle hydration that actually sells about 50% of it, which is this version for the smart water bottle. I actually had to be dragged kicking and screaming into making it. It was, I mean, like these Boy Scouts were I had gotten popular on one of these like Boy Scout boards for going to the Philmont place, but like there's these militant ultralight hikers talking about like you must use a smart water bottle because these Nalgene's are too heavy, and they're saying, well, they were willing to buy a smart water adapter, and I was like, well, well, I don't think you should be drinking from that. I don't think PET is healthy for long-term exposure. But I should have
Hmm.
thought they were willing to buy. Full
Yep.
stop. And it's your customers are telling you to do stuff. I should not have been sort of like, I should never have been a sort of like, you can't tell people how to use your product. You can't say like you're holding it wrong, you're using it wrong. You're there to serve them. So, if they
Yeah.
need something and they're willing to pay, and you can do it, and it wouldn't, impact you that much, let's try it. It's always
Yeah,
worth a
no, and
shot.
I think that's a great takeaway. And I mean, I think there's a balance, right? So you can't do everything that every client wants you to do, or you'll forever be shady the product and you'll never be profitable. And yet, to your point, is if you're getting consumers that are continuing to tell you, hey, this is what we want, can you do this? And it's not just a one-off for kind of the fringe client, but you're actually saying, no, this is something I'm repeatedly hearing, and it's something that we could do and expand into and provide that pathway forward. Then I think it makes sense to explore those avenues. You may find that it doesn't fit with your product, your mission, or anything else, but just to simply close it down without it looking at it, I think can oftentimes hinder. So I think that's definitely a great takeaway. Well, now as we wrap up, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
I have a website, https://one-bottle.com. I'm on Instagram at one bottle hydration, one_bottle_hydration. You can email me at onebottlehydration@gmail.com. And I try to return. I love talking to customers. I'm always excited to hear about the things that they're doing. My latest customer actually is using his one bottle hydration system for his $500 race car, which is super exciting. So it's going off into many different directions. I think I've got these wildland firefighters out there, and I love to talk to customers. Don't forget to reach out. It's one-bottle.com, and one bottle hydration at gmail.com, one bottle hydration Instagram. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Awesome.
Thanks
No,
for
I
the
think
show.
that's definitely great ways to connect, and certainly encourage everybody to check out an awesome product. Full disclosure, it's one of, or Matt is one of our intellectual property clients, and so I'm probably a bit biased, but I still think it's a good product. And both my wife and myself and the kids have used it as we've gone hiking, so it's an awesome product. And also, if nothing else, reach out and make a new best friend. So, well, with that, thank you again, Matt, for coming on the podcast. It's been fun. It's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you that are listeners, if you have your own journey to tell and you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, we'd love to have you. So just go to inventiveguest.com, apply to be on the show. Couple more things as listeners. Make sure to click share, subscribe, and leave us a review. So we want to make sure that everyone finds out about all these awesome journeys. And last but not least, if you ever need help with your patents, your trademarks, or anything else with your startup, your small business, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Thank you again, Matt, for coming on the podcast, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Yeah, I hope so. It's been getting better all the time. So let's keep
Awesome.
this trajectory upward.
I'm sure it will be a great journey. Thanks.